Well, good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Richard Cruz, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Warrant Officer Class 1 Kim Owen. Today we commemorate the Battle of Lone Pine, which cost the Australians over 2,200 casualties and more than 800 killed. We're honoured to acknowledge Admiral John Aquilino, United States Pacific Fleet Commander, United States of America, and Mrs. Lara Aquilino. Vice Admiral Michael Noonan, Chief of Navy, Australia, and Gary White, Warrant Officer of the Australian Navy, and the accompanying delegation. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors and students on behalf of the following schools. From Queensland, Holy Family Primary School, Indooroopilly. And from New South Wales, Forbes Public School. I invite you to please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. If you're able, please be seated. I'd now like to invite the Director of the Australian War Memorial, Dr. Brendan Nelson, to the lectern.
Today marks the 103rd anniversary of one of the most significant battles in Australia's military history, and that is the Battle of Lone Pine, a part of the August Offensive in 1915 to break out of the stalemate. It was a frontal assault by the Australians at 4:30 in the afternoon of the 6th of August. The Australians would assault across open ground of 100 metres to the Turkish trenches. Unbeknownst to the Australians, the Turks had not only dug their trenches, but reinforced them with pine logs and placed very thick layers of soil over the top of them. And then a complex array of tunnels and galleries went back behind those forward trenches. So the Australians would not only have to go across that open ground, but then physically find their way into the trenches and galleries. It was 4 days of subterranean anarchy. The fighting and the dying was with bayonets, bombs, clubs and teeth. At its end were 7,000 Turkish casualties, 2,300 Australian casualties. 7 Australians would be awarded the Victoria Cross. At its end, Sergeant Lawrence, the Australian tunnelling engineer, stood on the captured Turkish trenches and looked across no man's land to the lines from which the Australians had come. And he said, all the way across is just one mass of dead bodies. Beside me I count 14 of our boys stone dead. It is a piteous sight. Men and boys who yesterday were full of joy and life, now lying there, cold, glassy eyes, sallow, dusty faces, soulless, somebody's son, somebody's boy. The Major standing next to me says, "Well, we have won. That means a victory. My God, may I never see a defeat." The official First World War correspondent, who would become the historian, Charles Bean, observed and recorded what he would realise in 1916 was an emerging Australian character. Just minutes before the assault, on the 6th of August, a single Australian went to the very front trench and leant over to the men in it and said, "Is Bill here?" And a voice came from the fire step, "Yeah, right here, Jim. Do you blokes mind moving up a piece?" asked the first voice. "Him and me are mates, and we're going over together." Today we remember just one of them, but in doing so we remember them all, and also the courage of the brave Turkish defenders.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations over more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Corporal Charles James Lee. Charles Lee, known as Charlie, was born on the 16th of October 1894 to James and Amy Lee of Longford, Tasmania. Very little is known of his early life other than that he became a railway porter. Lee enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force within weeks of the outbreak of war in August 1914. He was posted to the 12th Battalion and underwent a period of training in Australia before leaving with the 1st Contingent in October. The 12th Battalion underwent a period of training in Egypt before leaving for Gallipoli. The 12th Battalion landed at Anzac Cove in the early hours of the 25th of April 1915. Broken up and distributed among the other 3 battalions of its brigade, the 12th Battalion suffered heavy casualties from rifle fire. Private Lee survived the confusion of the early days as the 12th Battalion reorganised and became actively involved in establishing and defending the front line of the Australian position on Gallipoli. Lee proved to be an able soldier and in July was promoted to corporal. In early August, the 12th Battalion lent 2 companies of men to the force attacking the Turkish position known as Lone Pine. In the early hours of the 6th of August 1915, the companies entered the front line to reinforce the 1st Battalion and remained, participating in the vicious hand-to-hand fighting. Corporal Lee was a member of one of these 2 companies. His friend, Sergeant Ormond, later recalled what happened that day. He wrote, "Our company was ordered to give a hand in the fight and help with trench digging and shifting sandbags. On the morning of the 8th, we occupied a trench from which the Turks had been driven the previous evening. The Turks were bombing us and that continually, and my word, if we went near hell, it was there. To tell the truth, I just wished I was wounded or killed to get out of it, as it was dreadful to continue. Here, Charlie got wounded and others with him, and before we could get them out, some were killed. I got a few boys to get some out, and when Charlie passed me, I could not recognise him. He looked so pale. Corporal Charlie Lee had been shot in the upper thigh and was evacuated from the peninsula by hospital ship. 4 days later, he succumbed to his wounds and died at sea." Sergeant Ormond wrote, "There was not a braver fellow than Charlie, who would go anywhere and such a good fellow to all. He was always jolly. Should you ever see his father, tell him from me that he died a hero's death, fighting for his king and country." Corporal Charlie Lee was 20 years old. He was buried at sea the same day he died. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, amongst almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Corporal Charles James Lee, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes this evening's last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.